Hello and welcome to Life Beyond the Numbers, the podcast for people who are curious about how to have a more fulfilling work life. We live in a world largely driven by numbers, logic and reason. But how we feel at work and about our work impacts us, our organisations and society. There is a relationship between the numbers of our organisations and the life beyond the numbers. I'm Tasneem Virani, your host. I've lived and worked in many countries. I've met people who love what they do and people who don't, people who bring their full selves to work and people who won't. But one thing that I've learned that is common to us all is that we are all unique and have unique experiences. And it's helpful to know that there are others who think like we do, or have had struggles too, or have gone where we want to go, or can show us things we didn't know. So join me and my guests as we place a lens on the human side of work life by sharing insights, stories and strategies to inspire you to let your uniqueness shine through. Well, today I am delighted to be joined by Tasneem Virani on Life Beyond the Numbers. Tasneem, you're so welcome.
Thank you so much for including me, and I'm excited to get our conversation going.
So am I, and we'd already been deep into conversation, even though we've only just met 10 minutes ago. And I had to get record going because otherwise we'd have brought all the juicy stuff out too early.
Yeah. So true.
I've recently read your book called Human Touch Leadership, and I can recommend it to anyone who's listening. But before we get into the book, I think something that both the book and your website echo is the fact that in the world today, we're increasingly being dominated by AI and technology of all sorts and automation. But this crucial element of humanity is being overlooked, the value of our human connection. So what have you got to say about that?
That's so true. When technology expanded many years ago, we thought we would replace humans with technology. And in fact, people got busier and busier and busier. If organizations can see that people are assets, they are the assets in the organization. I had a talk today with somebody who is growing his business, and he was saying how he's fascinated with all the automation that he can have, and everyone will be on chat. So you can see the reports and all on chat and respond on chat. And I actually said, how do you motivate them? It's the human that is driving that information. They also need input. So whereas some companies may decide, I want to be totally AI, and they communicate completely by AI, they are going to be missing out on that human, emotional integrity, innovation, or creativity. I'm not saying that AI is not good, because if you look at ChatGPT, it's getting better and better and better, and you think, oh, wow. But it's that voice, it's that passion, it's that disagreement that will make you think. Because if you don't agree with something, it just makes you think. And if you look at the human touch leadership, it's based on 3 principles. Human is the capacity of the human mind. So it's all the neuroscience that goes with it, the way the human mind works and how we grow as a person. Because if you look at the human mind, it has the animal, it has the reptilian, it has the heart, it has the gut, it has all these brains. But what makes it human are the 2 parts of the brain which are only human. But if we want to be able to understand it, it's nice to understand the neuroscience of it and how the neurotransmitters work, and how do I raise my human potential, and how do I have the conversations. And the touch is, how do I emote that brain? So how do we emote? And touch is through emotions. Emotions are energy in motion. So it's how do we work with the emotions and learn to use the techniques and behaviors around emotional intelligence, which separates the human animal from the human being. And then how do we speak to others? So that's the conversational intelligence, and that's all in touch. Now, I don't think AI can encapsulate all that very quickly. Leadership is how do we now lead in a world that's so diverse, with so many multiculturals and multi-generations, with empathy and compassion, and the power of listening to the other. All that requires increased self-awareness and social awareness, which I'm not saying AI can't plug in, and they're getting more and more advanced. But I still believe you will miss out on the debate and the interaction and the growth of growing another human being.
Absolutely. And it'd be interesting to hear what that leader's response was to the question about motivation, and we can come back to that in a second. But I also think, like, you can debate with ChatGPT, and I've done it, but it's never the same. There's no satisfaction at the end. And also, I don't know if it's telling me the truth or not, because AI has no, what would the word be? No affiliation to the truth. All it's doing is producing a summary of something it read. Whereas with a human, I'm going to have a good idea whether or not you're telling me the truth or we're speaking to each other honestly. And that helps my growth, I think. What was the leader's response, Tasneem, earlier?
Well, what was interesting, his brain was so focused on becoming the CEO of his company and delegating more and doing less, that he needed to stop for a moment to say, well, if I have these great people working for me, apart from me reading, I've got to motivate them and see how they feel about everything and what they're doing well. So it's going to be important for me to keep in touch with my people just through a conversation. So over delegation, yes, you can follow up through tracking systems, but where is the heart of the connection so that person becomes more loyal to you and can trust you to do more?
And you also mentioned creativity somewhere in that. And I think that's the other thing, isn't it? It's that once we trust people and feel they're going to listen to us and we can engage in conversation with them, I think that opens more of a creative challenge, because that's what uncertainty requires.
I think so, but there is another thing. Even in the way we have conversations with people, if we use words that stimulate fear and demotivate, the mind shuts down and you can't create. So imagine the executive brain is the part of the brain that synthesizes all the information and all the emotion within the body through good emotional intelligence. And yet your mind goes into a fear state. You'll shut your capacity, then you can't be creative. So a lot of the work I talk about is we create clouds in our mind. And how do we create clouds is when we are not utilizing those neurotransmitters or chemicals in the right way. So it's a flood. So we can't think straight, can't make a decision, can't create, lack innovation because there's that cloud. So it's learning to use the mind effectively so that you will create that space for creativity. And I think that's why it takes self-awareness and it takes time and practice. Many of us are caught into old habits of behavior, old habits on the way we communicate. Even look at within the family. If a child has grown up with you and you've talked to them a certain way, when they come back into your life, whatever age, They will act the old way, and they will see you the old way, and they don't see you in the new way because you're automatically going to the past programming. So even in that dynamic of a relationship, how can I have a growth mindset and see my mother or father in the way they are now? How can I have conversations that may have triggered me in the past, but now I know I'm an adult, not that child reacting, to build my parent in the future? It's the same with organizations. It's the human dynamics.
It is, isn't it? When you enter an organization first, you come from school, family, university, where you're used to being told what to do. And there is that parent-child almost tendency built into you when you enter an organization first. And I think that's often a first step people don't take, is realize, well, this boss is not my parent, or this manager is not my parent.
Yeah.
And there's a behavior change needed there too at that entry level, Tasneem, I think.
Yes. I think that there's another big factor that I don't know if you've seen that's happened, especially since the pandemic, is there was a shock when the pandemic happened and people went into fear and survival mode. And there are some symptoms of post-traumatic stress that have come out. But with that, people have become much more sensitive in the workplace. They trigger faster, their emotions need to be heard. And this term of psychological safety is now very apparent in the human resource circles. And if you think of psychological safety, it's based on a few principles. People want to give their input. They want to feel they've got value and want to be heard. People want to learn from mistakes. The old model was fear of failures, scared if I'm going to be told off. I have to do what I was told, otherwise I'm going to get told off. That whole change has happened now. And I think what we are facing in the Western world, and with multiculturalism and many different types of people coming into the workforce today, we find people who come from a culture which is still old school are entering into a new culture where, hey, I want you to give your opinion. I want your voice to be heard. And that's the dynamic that is challenging for a leader, because the leader will say, oh, well, they're always showing up, but they're not saying anything. I wonder what they're feeling and thinking. So the leader then moves to grow people using empathy and compassion and learning that I don't want to miss out on that person's ideas. I'm sure they have them, but they're used to a culture where they've just been told what to do. And I think there's such a shift today in the workplace. I just have to look at England. When Brexit happened, we lost a lot of the Europeans. They were short of labor, so they brought in people, giving them 6 weeks visas. Within 6 weeks, coming from the Indian subcontinent, Pakistan, from Africa, even from the Philippines. And all those cultures still operate in an old style leadership model. So when they come into the workplace, they are also adjusting because they have to deal with people who've been brought up in the West and they have to work with them. So I think it's a very exciting way of human development. And that's probably why I developed the course Human Touch Leadership Accelerator Program, because I wanted to help companies going through change in this culture to go through a 4 to 6 months program, which talks about the human side of the brain, gets them to do exercises, changes habits, and evolve them to learn how to use emotional and conversational intelligence and to come together in the way they collaborate towards the company's key performance indicators, competencies, or values that are ingrained to make a good culture. So I think I am passionate about that now because I see what has happened. We've got companies merging with other companies globally. You've got the hybrid workplace. You've also got companies who are operating an old school, and they've had so many changes that they're going through change management process of bringing in new people, but making sure their values are ingrained from the beginning. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics happening. And I thought, if I partner with the people and culture, or the human resources, or the CEO, and work with me on a 4 to 6 months, just 90 minutes a month with homework, we can push that mind to be reflective, to think about the situation, and to see the vision of where I want to get to and how, with support and all the managers working together. So it moves them from being silos to collaborative. And I think that's the way the world is going. It's more consultative, it's more collaborative, and it's more about building the other. AI is not going to do that for us.
It's absolutely not. And that's what I was thinking while you were speaking there is, many organizations want to do things more efficiently, have better productivity, have better performance, and so on. And they're missing that link between people and performance. I think there's a thing about, if we can automate everything, then we have a need for less people, so we'll be more efficient and so on. But actually, the more your people are motivated and enlightened and relate to you better, then the better the performance. And the better the performance, the higher the results of the organization. It has an impact on the bottom line. And if you're working in an organization like we see at the moment, where people are disengaged and aren't giving their best selves, aren't being motivated, that also has a massive impact on a bottom line.
I think the challenge that we face is that when people are given too much to do, which is fine, but if people don't learn to manage that human mind effectively, they become robotic themselves. So they spend more time doing than thinking. And they don't listen to the emotions that are coming up. And this is when they get overstressed, they don't want to come to work, and they can't think straight. And then when companies see that, they say, oh, I'm better off with a robot and using AI. I don't have to deal with all this stuff. But if they could see that people are assets, and there is something that I've learned a lot about the energy. If you put more positive energy collectively and manifest it, you create new things. You just think, if you're around people who are positive and you all see something familiar together and you see it and the energy you create, there's like not only a huge oxytocin rush in the brain, but there is also the power of manifestation. And that's another field I'm tapping into now to understand more of the power of the energy through manifestation, which people have talked about, but to see how successful companies who know that they've got there and they get all their people on the same track to get there and visualize it, good things seem to happen. I don't know if you've felt that as well.
Absolutely. And it's something I'm exploring more and more, Tasneem. And there is still, though, for many of us, I think, there is still this divide. We have the rational, logic part of our brains, the thinking mind that just wants to do, like you said, versus the more esoteric, if you want, or creative or energetic, that once that gets a little bit of space, a little gap, good things happen.
Good things happen. Yes. When we put our mind into fear, we lose hope. When we have our mind into trust, try and move from fear to trust and hope, the magic just happens. There's an experiment I sometimes do with groups, and I say, okay, think of the color of the car that you want to buy. Maybe a car, maybe a house, just think of it and what color it is. Then when I call them back and they've thought about it and put it into their psyche, things just happen in that 2 weeks where they suddenly see so many red cars, or they suddenly get posts that they see that come on email. And it's like coincidences going to, or they meet somebody who talks about it. And I think that's it. It's the power of the human mind. Because if scientists have said that 70,000 bits of data flow through the world at any given second, you can't take in 70,000 data. You're going to take in the data where your subconscious is going with, and you're going to attract it. So I think the human mind is fascinating, and it's a work in motion. And like you said, there is an esoteric component. And the more you discover it through meditation, the more you can see that there is something there beyond that, which when the mind is used effectively, comes out of the executive brain.
Absolutely. And it is beyond the numbers. And this is life beyond the numbers for sure, because in leadership and in management, we come back to the numbers and to the KPIs and to the logic. And we're almost afraid to step away from that field because there isn't a formula for the magic. There is, but there's no results guaranteed, let's say. However, results aren't guaranteed anyway. There's no certainty just because you have a budget for the year. In fact, that probably curtails your innovation and creativity because you're almost just following what you did last year. So how do you, me, anyone else listening even, how do we lean in more, I guess, Tasneem, to the power of the collective human intelligence that I think you're talking about here?
Okay, I've got a webinar next week, but I'm going to do it quite often, is the culture catalyst, human touch leadership. Even if you look at culture and people do put in their mission, values, and vision on a wall, it can't be translated into motion unless it's acted on. So it's like what you're saying about the numbers. They can't be just put in a wall unless there's an action behind it. And if you get people believing purposefully, moving in the same direction as you, then everybody is creating that movement together. But if you don't connect with the heart, find the purpose, have regular interactions with them, then you're not forming that culture. It's just becoming something on the wall. And then you're wondering why you're not reaching those numbers or why those values are not being lived.
That's it, isn't it? It's following those connections. And I think we're very quick to blame somebody in some department or that one person and so on, when actually, as you say, it is the culture, which is often very difficult to define. But you can ask anyone in your organization and they'll be able to tell you also what the culture is. Now, something you said earlier, Tasneem, that's very close to my own heart is the fact that we aren't listening to emotions that are coming up for us, because I guess we've been brought up, again, it comes back to a lot of our conditioning, not to, that emotions are wild and are going to send us off into a frenzy and we should be afraid of them.
And yet emotional literacy now is taught into schools, and there's a whole thing about recognizing my emotion, how you're feeling, and building on those emotional literacy words, because Without emotional intelligence, in fact, I have a diagram and I was trying to pull it out, but it's basically emotional intelligence behaviors are ones where you listen, you have empathy, you include, you take a risk because you know you're trusted, and you collaborate more. When you don't have enough emotional intelligence, and it's not a labeling, but it's more to observe and look, you exclude, you criticize, you blame, and you are fearful of making mistakes. So then you operate from the limbic side of the brain rather than the executive brain. Because emotional intelligence, when you learn to use it, and this is why I connect the three principles, is you learn how to shift those chemicals in the mind. You learn the importance of deep breathing and stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system rather than constantly producing more and more cortisol, which is necessary, but it actually clouds your thinking. I think in life, if we are in this world to learn more about ourselves and to learn more about the other, it just makes the world a much richer place.
The most common, perhaps, excuse, for want of a better word, that people will use to not increase their emotional intelligence or learn about themselves or the other is a lack of time. And it is almost like it's counterproductive, isn't it?
Yeah, they say, I don't have time. I know even through the program, I ask them, have you done the homework? Because I look through the homework. We haven't had time, which tells me they're constantly reacting to the doing. And it only takes a minute to take deep breathing, to take deep breaths and pauses throughout the day, and to get your mind centered again. And if you really get into the practice of 5 to 10 minutes meditation in the morning when you start your day, or walking around nature and breathing deeply, or doing different things in the day that take your mind away from the action, that give you that warm, fuzzy feeling inside, you just released a lot of oxytocin. And we need that oxytocin fuzzy feeling to help the brain center, the mind center more. And I think that's the thing. I remember when I was doing some work with nursing homes, and when I would get them to stop to think, and even the way they conduct their meetings for the morning meetings or the handover meetings, it's so task related. And there's no life in it. These are the issues today. This is how we're going to solve it. And when I help organizations to sort of say, okay, in the morning, do a 1-minute check-in with everyone. How are you feeling? And just to clear their head so they can start their day. And at the end of the day, show appreciation. These are the neurotransmitters or chemicals that just person needs to carry on. You did a great job with this person today. I noticed how you did this. You see the change in the person's face.
You do. And all of this is so simple. And it's for everyone, isn't it? It doesn't matter if you sweep the streets or you're the CEO of a Fortune 500 company.
Yeah.
We all want to feel like we belong somewhere, that people recognize our contribution, that they're appreciative of what we do. And yet, I think many people think, well, you get paid, so that should be enough.
Exactly, but the person feels hurt. I know people who say to me, I am just a number who picks up a paycheck. And nobody has ever said to me how my work has contributed. And I don't know what I'm doing. And when they get into that low mode, then the self-talk changes in their own brain and they get depressed and they don't want to work for that company anymore.
No, and it's so simple to turn around. It really is. Now, Tasneem, you wrote a book, as we talked about earlier, Human Touch Leadership, Embodying Emotional Intelligence in a Rapidly Changing World, with reflections from 27 leaders. And you were just telling me about what prompted you to write this book. So maybe you would tell us all here.
Well, this book Human Touch has been in my mind for 15 years or more, but I never got the time to sit down and write it. And I tend to work with companies who care about people. I don't go and work for companies who just care about the numbers. I don't think I'm a good fit for them, but the ones who care about people and culture. So when the pandemic happened, because I was in the hospitality sector and the care sector became very busy and the hospitality sector shut down. So I lost my clients. So I thought, wow, this is a time that I can put all my ideas and learning over the last 25, 30 years and all the certifications that I've had in mediation and conversation intelligence, emotional intelligence, and start putting it to use and the value of positive psychology. But then I thought I didn't have the confidence to really write the book without a backup. And then I thought of all these people who must be going through things with their businesses have stopped. So I decided, okay, let me identify 27 people from different countries, different professions, mixture of entrepreneurs, business leaders, young and older, different generations. And let me find out through 10 questions how they were moving through this change. Everyone was so ready because everyone wanted somebody to talk to. And the questions really related to them. And I wanted to see how I could move them through the conversations with their own emotions towards pivoting. And all those 27 people surprised me because they did have a growth mindset. And maybe fear created a growth mindset. And they were open to looking at the future with new lenses. And what was interesting, just like me, I pivoted to the book because I felt I had never got time to do it. In their space, they pivoted because they had time with all the ideas they had 5, 10 years before, which they hadn't implemented. Those ideas came to the front and they pivoted to implement those ideas for their lives and their business. So it was a conversation. And that gave me the confidence. Okay, I got these stories. Now let me put it all into practice. And I had the time. And that's when I decided to write the book. And then after the pandemic happened, I've sort of read a lot, talked to different companies. And then I thought, I'm going to put a formula out now. And Human Touch Leadership Accelerator Program, built that, got it accredited. It carries CPD credits. It's customizable for companies according to what their agenda is, but it still follows the 3 principles in methodology. So it creates new habits, it gets people to think, and it starts getting people to get to know each other and work better with each other with the goals of the company. This is for companies because I'm passionate about the culture of companies. But the other course I wrote is for individuals who need a formula to get back on track. And that's achieving clarity and purpose. Even if they've lost their way within their own company, or they want to change careers, or they want to develop new habits, or they're at different stages in their life. This is a course of 7 weeks. I have it as an online course at the moment, which they can do in their own pace and their own time. And I also am now introducing it to be done live with me through Zoom over 7 weeks in a group. And that too follows the principles of human touch leadership, because through the questions and the exercises I give them, I'm shifting those neurotransmitters in their brain so that they can think clearly using the prefrontal cortex and work with emotional intelligence throughout the program.
At the end, we'll come back to how people can find out more about those, Tasneem.
Yeah.
Now, two other intelligences that you speak about in the book, because we've talked a little bit about emotional intelligence, and you have brought up conversational intelligence and reflective intelligence. But maybe you could spend a little bit of time just chatting through what those two mean, conversational intelligence and reflective intelligence, in case people listening haven't heard of these terms before.
So reflective intelligence is really more about stopping, looking back, not beating yourself up, but looking back, how could I have done that differently? Or what is it that I have achieved today? What am I grateful for? All practices that help to stimulate those chemicals in the brain. It's really stopping to think, appreciation, and maybe sometimes forgiving myself. Self-compassion is a big thing because sometimes we blame ourselves, but we also need to give ourselves a self-compassion. When we look at conversational intelligence, Judith Glazier, who wrote the book and who I certified with, she's no longer here, but her book is out there. She saw that how the chemical and through diagrams that words create worlds in people's mind. If you take that concept, you know, when you tell a child, don't do that, they're going to do it more. If you say to somebody, you should be like this, they're going to feel inadequate. So it's learning to use words that stimulate thinking towards positive behaviors and language. Another big portion of conversation intelligence is to build collaboration and co-create solutions. The way one can do that is through asking the right questions. So it's questions that motivate rather than questions that make people think you're just prying into me.
Or judging me.
Or judging me, exactly. Learning to use questions that are transformational to make people think. In module 5 and 6 of the program, I touch on it. And the program actually, when I look at it, it changes behavior. So it's not a magic pill, but it's a catalyst. Because a lot of people are in the don't know that they don't know. So when they come through this, they begin to say, oh, that makes sense, that makes sense. And I'm hoping that this catalyst helps them to look at things differently in the way they continue learning or continue reading different books and courses or work with a coach, whether it's me or anybody else, that just grows them more. They're not stuck. And organizations also become more fluid.
Yeah, and I think there's also that recognition, perhaps, that they're not alone.
Yes.
Because often I think we think that because we're normal to ourselves, what we do and how we behave and act is normal to us. And so we may not see that other people have similar ways of working or ways of holding themselves back. And also, we may think that we're doing okay. We don't need to change. We don't need to develop or be more self-aware.
And you and I both know how many people are in that bracket. Well, I'm comfortable now. I'm happy. Why do I need to do more? Or I don't need to feel that. I just need to let go. And maybe it works for some. But I think when you're working in organizations and you're working with people, well, it's really 8 hours a day. And it's 8 hours, that's 40 hours of your waking time. It's nice to build relationships and learn from the other and get that oxytocin rush of having fun and building and being valued and feeling appreciated and feeling that you are doing purposeful work. So another thing that I look at, and when I have the introductory with the organizations when I start, is really understanding what do they want? Why would this help you? And what do you really, really want? Because when I can get to see that, I can customize and inject more questioning and move the workshops towards the outcome. So you can measure the beginning and you can measure the end. And you can see if they want the managers to talk to each other more, work more interdepartmentally for the common good, see the overall vision of the company, then they're forced to do that 90 minutes a month with me. And then they have breakouts so they can have more conversations and get to know how each one thinks.
And I can also see then how that phrase you used from Judith Glaser of words create worlds.
Yes.
Can create new worlds as well. So some of the worlds that we've created, we want to move on to another world. And it's helping people find those words, I think. There's magic in that.
Yeah. The thing I'm still learning is that people get triggered by different words. And that comes from their childhood, or that comes from events that they had in the past. Like lately, I remember people getting triggered with safeguarding is used like a very dangerous word. Oh, it's a safeguarding issue. Or we need to investigate. Or this somebody's brought up a grievance and we need to investigate. Can you imagine the cortisol rush in the person's mind? They go into fear state. What is this about? I'm going to be judged. I'm going to be criticized. And that's not healthy for organizations. So it's learning to use different language that can motivate and build and open up conversations rather than close them.
That's the key actually there, isn't it? It's the opening up, because a lot of those words that you used there, the language is very much, I'm in charge, you're not.
Yeah.
You do as I say, and the hierarchy. And while there's no harm as such in a hierarchy, there's also many ways a hierarchy can be more inclusive and more participative and more regenerative by appreciating their language and the interactions between people.
And I've learned one thing myself. You can talk about things, but you've got to live them. Is that I also sometimes get triggered with my own biases. And I move into that space, which I regret later. And then what I've tried to do now is repair it. So I go back and say, I'm sorry if I came across the wrong way. There was too much on my mind. Or I'd say, I'm sorry I did that because my own personal beliefs came in the way. But that was my reflective intelligence. To say, that didn't go very well. I really triggered that person. But I don't want to lose that relationship with that person. I need to just go back and see what could I have done differently. So it's a work in progress.
Absolutely. That's life anyway, work in progress. But I also love that word that you used, Tasneem, there, which is differently. Because you're not saying, how could I have done it better? Which already puts a judgment into.
Yes.
Whereas the differently, again, allows the mind to open to choice.
To choice. To choice. And not beating oneself up. One of the things with conversational intelligence, I do a session on self-talk. So what are the things that you say to yourself? And if you keep saying negative things to yourself and you don't reflect on it and see how you can say it differently, you just produce too much cortisol in your mind.
I don't know how your self-talk was writing your book. The last solo episode I recorded, which went out at the end of April, was about the self-talk I noticed during my own writing process and how dealing with that was so important, because you're right, the cortisol was coming rather than the oxytocin, and that just builds and builds.
Yeah.
And so shifting that to appreciative, to self-compassion was crucial really for momentum. And I wonder if that's why a lot of people get stuck when they are doing something creative, because we don't give ourselves credit.
Yeah, I think that's true. I remember when I wrote the book, I kept on thinking, why would anyone read my book? There's so many people out there who write better than me, who are much more in tune with this stuff. I mean, Daniel Goleman will probably say, what is she writing here? I went through that phase. And then I said, well, it's my book. I want it out there. It's simple. I didn't write it for those intellectuals. I wrote it for that businessman who's on a plane and needs to just learn a little bit of positive psychology and just to become a little bit self-aware of the way he looks at his people in his organization. I see a lot of people who are very wealthy in their businesses, but I also look at them with sadness because there's no self-growth. There's no self-growth. They're either fighting for the next success and their relationships are hard and possibly very lonely inside. I think one has to think, what are the most important factors in my life? And how can I live my life so that I look at it when I leave this world, people will remember me. And I love Maya Angelou's comment. People will forget what you did and what you said, but they will never forget the way you made them feel.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I hope we're going to leave people with a feeling today.
Yeah, I hope so. We all make mistakes and it's okay. The amount of repairing I even do with my grandkids and my children, I've made a lot of mistakes when they were growing up. I thought I was doing the best job. And then when you see it later, you go back and say, I'm really sorry, I didn't see it that way. There's no harm in apologizing or forgiving or being grateful or having that self-compassion either.
Totally. And I think that's so important actually, is to be able to say everybody does the best they can given where they are at that point in time. And as you learn and grow, you can see then, oh, I could have done it differently. And it means a lot to people, I think, if you do go back and say to them, I wish I knew now or knew then what I know now, but this is where we are.
So we're never an expert. Even now, what we both know, we know now what we know now. What we'll know in 10 years' time will be different. And we hope we're on a continuum of growth.
I hope so. I hope so. And it's enjoyable as well. That's the thing. Life gets easier and more
Have a
fun.
growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. Yes.
Yeah, and more magical. If somebody would like to connect with you and learn more about your book, about your programs, about you, what is the best way of doing that, Tasneem?
Okay, there are two ways. I have a landing page and I have a website, but I think go to the website, which is www.clariscoaching.com, and you get all the information. And then there's an email there, and just email me if you can't navigate through that website or you want direct information on what I've said now. The book is available on Amazon, and it's a Kindle version as well as you can buy it, and it's not very expensive. And it can be bought anywhere in the world.
Perfect. And I really did enjoy reading it. So thank you. I love we didn't get time today, but I love the Rumi quote about the guest house that you use at the end as well. So maybe we can leave that with people so they pick it up to find out.
I am so happy you read the book, because a lot of people I've given the book to, and even people I've run the program for, and I find they don't read the book. They just skim it. But you actually read the whole book and found the guest house at the end. So thank you.
Oh, you're most welcome. And I do love to read, so that makes a difference as well. But also the topic is very close to my own heart and my own belief system and values and everything. So yeah.
I look forward to reading your book,
Thank you. Thank you.
Living Beyond the Numbers. I hope
Yes.
we can do something together.
Who knows? Who
Who
knows,
knows?
Tasneem? Yeah. So thank you so much for your time today and for this lovely conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed the paths we traversed on today's episode. If something rang through for you, be sure to let me know. Or maybe you can share this with someone in your life who would benefit from listening too. And if you enjoy helping others, I'd be so grateful if you would leave a review, so that people who might also be curious about their own life beyond the numbers can discover this podcast too.